Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9 or 9.1, and of course we are playing as Germany. So please come along on the strange, weird adventure. Looked like we just got a new IC down, so that's readjusted everything down to 5.3. Some of it had been a little lower, some of it had been a little higher. Okay, we still have a good cushion. When these hit, they'll really adjust it down. So that's part of the calculation we need to make here. Oh, we need to get these up to the top. Uh-oh, unless that goes too long. Gotta remember to do that. Notice I forgot. Probably if I had hit it when it... See, if I had hit it when it first happened, it would be cost 0 ICs each one of these. Now it'll cost an IC for a day, 1.74 a day. I mean, obviously that, you know, oh, it's costing, you know, just for a day. So it'll take a 24-hour day pop through. But it gets all the production cost gets recalculated every time something gets produced, gets out there. Der Essay Man. The Essay Man, the newspaper of the, was the, again, I need a good editor. Or I need to read these things. Well, when I first type these things, I'm sort of reading them with what I thought I wrote, if you know what I mean, as opposed to what I actually wrote. The Essay Man was the newspaper of the Brown Shirt Army. Reads the sign. Oh, maybe that's because just translating the sign. Der Essay Man, the official political weekly paper for the SA Stormtroopers. It was printed in the Central Publishing House of the NSDAP. So, party newspaper, gains organization a little bit of popularity. That's a sign for it. That's, you know, what a couple of copies look like, and there's a poster up there for it. These like metal signs, they would place them, you know, Die Zeitung der Braunen Armee, as it says there. You know, that's okay. So I'm literally there. The SA Man, Der SA Man. Okay, so I did that right. I should maybe put that in little quote thingies to know that I meant that. So no, that's absolutely right. That isn't meant to be redone, because that is the SA Man. One word. The news, or put a comma there. The newspaper for the Brown Army. Okay, that makes sense. But they would put these type of signs up, like where it was being sold, where this is more of a, you know, an paper advertisement thing, to do it, like on a building or some sort of kiosk or something. Again, I'm trying to just give you sights, can't do sounds, but sights of what you would have seen if you lived in Germany at this time. You would have seen those newspapers, whether you read it or not. That's another matter. You would have seen the metal sign. You would have seen those posters. Just give you a little taste of what it was like to be in that society at the time. That is one of the goals that TRE has. So building our base is -5%. That's a big one. Business boosts because we're doing long term. Okay, naval strike tactics. We're going to move. Naval strike tactics 37. We're going to move these over to. I want to get because this one's going to take a long time. It's public information. We're going to get that going. Okay, we're losing that money. The money was helping us a lot. It's now down to that. Okay. Infantry attacks. I've read the book 2 or 3 times. Used to keep it in my car whenever I, you know, had waiting for somebody or something to read it. Very good book. And notice it's mountain warfare training, basically, because that's what he was, a mountain warrior kind of guy. That's what it covers. It covers small unit infantry attack tactics. I mean, he starts out in the, you know, the sort of Flanders invasion. most of the rest of it, he's in the mountains, but he's with mountain troops, and so you can learn how to fight mountain warfare. Okay, arrow engines. No, it's here. Okay, and it's grayed out, but we're coming over here, and I want to get this too. Get these 12s up and going now. So they're going to take the longest. You know what we're going to do here? Well, okay. The Marine crew burning has advanced. We got those two 12s. We got that 12. So that's what I'm sort of kind of looking at here. That 12. Those are going to take the longest. Get them in producing. Okay, let's do industry here. So get that going. So we're still very early 37, and we're doing mostly 38, or starting now 38 techs. There's still some, you know, tactical things to do in 37, but I'm an infrastructure guy. Okay, railroad network advance. There we go. Yes, I know it's 38, but I have other more important ones to do. Going. Single engine airframe, small fuel tank, and medium fuel tank. So we've got a bunch of these, I believe, will have been grayed out. Yes. Since they're mostly 38s, let's do. I want to do infrastructure. If we're going to push ahead, I want to push ahead on infrastructure. Let's do. We have. And some bit more. So, well, let's do these. Keep from burning out on that. Railway levels 2. Yep, until July 37. It'll take a while, but another 2.5%. But that will be. Okay, well here, what I want to do here is, let's tag this right, okay, right about there. We're going to tag that there. See if that will keep me from having to go up and down too much. I think it goes down to none, and then, oh, it needs another 20, and then it builds, and so that. Because we can lose like less than half of an IC just to try to keep that maintained. Instead of optimized. Here, let's optimize that, though. Because I really take it as no big deal to lose. You know, you see me constantly adjusting things, yes, but if it was meant a constant thing, okay. But so we're losing 2.5%, but we're getting some IC efficiency of a 0.2% up, and supply throughput, which will be really critical once we're talking, you know, Eastern Front. Infantry unit training has advanced, great. 38, and again, we're going to move this to. Well, let's do these. Get these going first. Infantry unit. Okay. The SS had their whole sort of medical infrastructure. Of course, you often hear about the, you know, Dr. Mengele and the very evil stuff that he did, and he did very evil things. But they also had a big medical training facility that, you know, was sort of like army doctors, but basically, but the SS were also doing that. So healthy soldiers, a little more. Okay. Mit Brennender Sorge, with burning concern. This is part of the Christian Church, Catholic in this case, resistance to Nazism. I'm going to start later this week, or maybe by the time you're watching this, I'll probably have already started because I'm making a few episodes ahead, having fun playing. Trying not to get too far ahead, but sometimes instead of just making one episode a day, I'll make 2 or 3. New book on what is it called? Hitler's Monsters. I haven't even started it yet, but I heard the author being interviewed. And he really looks at the various cultural and, if you will, religious influences in National Socialism. I want to sort of use it that way. And it follows along with some of the stuff I believe, based, and I believe it not just because some sort of intuitive thing, but I believe it because of the things I've read and watched, and he goes into it. And from the interview is he went in, and part of his research, and I didn't know this until today, because I watched this interview earlier today, and I actually got the audiobook for it. I'm going to listen to it. One of my jobs that my real sort of job, which we won't go into or anything, nothing secret, but I just don't need to talk about it, allows me to be able to listen to audiobooks while doing it. So I listen to a fair amount of stuff doing that. But which I didn't know is the U.S. government confiscated Hitler's library, or at least one of them. So I know the U.S. government confiscated Hoffman's photo archive. And although I know that you can license the use of Hoffman's photos through, a photo licensing service, and I don't know quite how they're getting those, because they're different, but the U.S. captured one major archive element of Hoffman. Hoffman was that sort of Hitler's personal photographer. Hitler got to know very early on, and who photographed a lot of Hitler. But he and his studio, meaning other photographers working for him, photographed all kinds of National Socialist things. Well, the U.S. government, as part of defeating Germany, got in and confiscated the Hoffman photo collection, and it's a part of the National Archives or something, and it's open public source, at least for Americans. Which I find it sort of weird that some companies trying to, you can license using it. Yeah, but I'm an American. We kick Germany's ass, so we get to use their photos for free. And I want to see somebody try to collect money to. This Nazi estate wants money from me for using its photos in my mod. Really, you're going to try to somebody collecting money off of Nazis and Nazi work? Yeah, no, that stuff's in the public domain, and that stuff is very different than Hitler going around and collecting everybody's art. Okay, very different. We went in, the U.S. collected all that art, but we've been trying to give it back, and we still have warehouses full of paintings that some of the stuff you saw in the museums, man. But we've not been able to find somebody that we can give it to. Obviously, I'm sure you could give it to some National Archive, but it doesn't necessarily belong to somebody's National Archive. So we still but we didn't go around to people's houses and collecting stuff. We collected the art that the Nazis collected, and we tried to, like you've seen in the museums, return much of it. But there's still warehouses of stuff that hasn't been returned in the U.S. National Archives. But it's different to go in and actually collect the Nazi, paintings and the Nazi made photograph collections and that stuff. But they also got at least one of his Hitler's libraries. So I'm saying this because I know Berchtesgaden was the estate here was bombed in the later days of the war. This built an air raid on it, so I don't know. I'm sort of guessing it's from that, but because it wasn't completely destroyed. They later dynamited it and blew the whole place up. There's just sort of the foundation left now, and I sort of suspect it's not the one that was up here because the Russians probably would have got it, but did get a library of Hitler. But this was one of Hitler's libraries that I didn't know that existed, and I didn't know they had. And this author went in and read a bunch of it, partially just to see what Hitler had in his library, But Hitler went around and underlined passages in the books and made some notations. And so they sort of know what his underlining looked like. And so they know, some of the stuff for sure. And then okay, well, let's underline the same way. So presumably he was doing it. So this guy actually goes in and his try to find out what Hitler was reading, which is a critical thing. I earlier talked about Hitler's non-driving, though he loves cars and loves riding in the front seat of cars. No fear of going fast. He wants to go fast on that Autobahn. I mean, it's not like race car stupid fast, but it's, powering down the Autobahn fast. He loves that. That's cool. He just has his driver do it. But he does, and I can understand having his driver do it if he's not experienced at doing that. But he doesn't even go really slowly around slow, tracks or something. But, so finding out about Hitler by what he read and what he kept in his library and actively read and actively underlined, because you can have a copy, and maybe he does, I don't know, they didn't, at least in the interview, didn't go over what he had in his library. You can have a copy of Das Kapital and never really cracked it open and read it, just got it, want to know what the communists think, but never really read the book, or maybe you read the book but you hate it. But, but if you read the book, and even if you hate it, but you may underline certain things, whether you hate or love it or whatever, and so you then tried it. So it was fascinating that he did, but but it also talks about the belief systems in the Nazis, and this is some of the stuff that I want to get into and read. But it's very much goes with the idea that the Nazis were anti-Christian at its core, and the author sort of says, well, of the millions, however many million the people that joined the Nazi party, many of them were probably pretty good Christians, but the leadership, and he totally agrees, the leadership was anti-Christian, and he goes into some of the reasons why they were anti-Christian. A lot of it was because of Jews, and they associated Christianity with Jewishism, which obviously it is, because Jesus Christ was a Jew. Jesus Christ taught if you will, a reformed version of Judaism. Christians are just sort of, we don't do kosher things. We don't quite do we don't celebrate Hanukkah, but we believe in the same God, and our main, we believe in the same book. You call it the Torah, we call it the Old Testament. I'm just saying we Christians. So that kind of thing. So I'm not trying to say me specifically, but we Christians would believe in the same Old Testament. You call it the Torah. It's basically the same book, and we just have this addendum, the New Testament, teaching Reformed Judaism that Jesus didn't, because it's all Pauline doctrine, that taking it out to to the Gentiles, to the non-Jews, but Jesus practiced all of the Jewish laws and all that stuff. So yes, Christianity is Jewishism. And this is why the Nazis are anti-Christian at its core. They really come into, and the guy talked about, he just sort of talked about a brief interview, and he's and I'm sure I'm going to, later on in this series, once I get through this book, I'm sure going to talk about it a lot. But he talks about, in the interview, how it's sort of a mix of Germanic paganism, if you will, mixed with Eastern thought, and coming out, and I already knew a bunch of this, but it's coming out of the Theosophical Society and Madame Blavatsky, that is introducing this sort of weird social Darwinism of Eastern thought kind of thing, of some ancient lost peoples and races, that the Nazis, and actually pre-Nazis, and I know this, Guido von List and some other people that latch onto this and then start tweaking it. This is what comes out with Hitler and these Nazis, and these are so it's this weird. And as the author was saying, well, or the interviewer was going, isn't that sort of weird that the Nazis were into this Eastern stuff? Who would have thought? I go, what was I'm sort of changing it, but got to remember what the symbol of the Nazi Party is: the swastika, which is the Eastern religious symbol. The swastika, you can find traces of some of it. In some of the tile things, the way it's sort of connected is an accidental swastika. There are some very early Celtic stuff that was dug up that has some sort of swastika in it. I've seen some of that. So that and I think it's more Celtic. I think And if these things that were dug up aren't hoaxes, just because I don't know how good the archaeology was at the time. I think it's more Celtic than Germanic, but I think there are some Celtic swastika stuff. But it really coming out of this Eastern mysticism, Buddhism, Hinduism, swastika use, and so the Nazis have picked, and which and it wasn't that Hitler picked this symbol. The symbol was used by the I know it, and it's the Geschaft, the Thule Society Geschaft, the Thule Geschaft, picked the swastika, and it was sort of, but it was used in the trenches in World War I. And in the immediate post-World War I Freikorps were putting swastikas on their helmets and stuff. But not in the, often they were white swastikas and there were other sort of swastikas as sort of a good luck thing. So this is already bubbling up in the culture of Germany before Hitler joins the Nazi Party. Now, he may have also been putting swastikas on things, though we've never seen like a World War I photo with a swastika anywhere on him. He sort of, puts it into its final form himself, literally himself. He puts it into the final form for the DAP, the Deutsches Arbeiterspartei. But so it's all this sort of mixture of Neo-Germanic paganism with Neo-Eastern mysticism, religious stuff mixed. That's the core of Nazism. I mean, that is the core of Nazism. Now, we always hear Nazi and fascist, Nazi and fascist. Partially, that is just America and other nations during World War II. Partially, of just trying to make shorthand what they were fighting. Really, what they were fighting was totalitarianism. Well, why aren't we fighting the communists? They're totalitarian. Well, we're fighting the totalitarians that are fighting us, or whatever. But that's really what they were fighting, because Japan is not fascist. Japan is not National Socialist, not Nazi. Japan is something else, but it is a type of totalitarianism. It's different. That's part of it. Part of it is the propaganda. All the people that were against Nazis and fascists just tried to have slogans, and anybody on the right, those are just the fascists, those are just the bad guys. If you call somebody a fascist, he's a bad guy, you can dismiss them. That's why since George Bush was a fascist, you could dismiss him. Since Mitt Romney was a fascist, you could dismiss him. And then you get Trump, and he's a fascist, and you can dismiss him. So they're all fascists. So you know what? If Trump's a fascist, oh well, is that any worse than Bush being a fascist? Bush was okay president. You shouldn't complain. Obviously, not even Trump is a fascist. But if you keep calling everybody a fascist, when a real fascist shows up, what are you going to do? Call him a Nazi? Well, you've already called Bush. What was Bush's name? Bush Hitler. Bush Hitler. Once you've already called Trump Hitler, when a real Hitler shows up, it's that crying wolf. You leftists has been crying wolf so much that when the real bad guy shows up, no one's going to believe you. That's part of it. The third part of it is that the left, coming out of Karl Marx, we can diverge it between the communists and the socialists. I do believe the core of the socialism is just a non-revolutionary path to communism someday, eventually in the great distant future. But for now, we're just trying socialism. But some people just only want socialism and don't really want to get to communism. But, but these people see particularly political stuff through an economic lens. Because if you look at Marx's history, okay, Marx's history. I'm not talking about Marx's, Das Kapital, but Marx's history. And this is sometimes, and Marxist history has permeated, in my opinion, the entire historical history industry, if you will, the academia. They see history through Marx's lens, which I reject. I'm not necessarily a revisionist in some of the revisionist terms, but they see history through an economic lens and see, well, why do you fight this war? Oh, it's for economic reasons. You know, it's always for economic reasons. That's the way they see it. And it's permeate. And I'm not even talking about professors and writers and teachers and other people that are conservatives, that are anti-Marxist. They still, the way they've grown up and the way they view history and the way they view it as values through economy. And that's partly because Marx had a point in that history plays a massive role. Economics. Sorry, I messed that up. Economics plays a massive role in history. But it is not necessarily the primary determinant. Okay? And we're getting back to this with burning concern. It's going to come full circle. Sorry if this is taking a bit of time, but it's going to come full circle. I would argue, particularly in a lot of the Middle Ages, people did things, whether it's going to war or the way they farmed their fields or whatever it is. You know, again, it's not necessarily political decisions. It's literally the method of farming their fields and the way they did different things wasn't based necessarily on the best economic reasons, meaning not necessarily because it produced the most food, or we went to war because we can take somebody's land, or they were threatening our industry. This is the way Marxists view history. I would say, particularly but it goes into the Renaissance and its other times, and we can look at different things. A lot of it is based on Christianity and the sort of the belief system, if you will. So let's pull it away from Christianity, from the very strong belief systems that the people in the Middle Ages believed. And that's the way they viewed the world. So a lot of them, and again, we'll go, and it's even before Protestant Reformation, even before Martin Luther put up his bill of indictment on the Cologne church doors, cathedral doors. Probably getting some of that wrong, sorry. Even before Martin Luther, so even before Protestantism, a lot of these people thought, you know what, it's better to kill these people now so that they can go to heaven, because heaven was more important than living. You know, if you're killing them to be able to get people the right religion, you know, to be able to preach the correct religion, because there are dissenting elements, you know, through early Middle Ages and you know, the Dark Ages, you know, different Christian sects, and you know, yes, because you know this little child is like a baby is without sin, it doesn't know anything, so if we kill it, fine, but we're saving its soul so it doesn't become corrupted by being taught the wrong type of religion. These people truly believed that. I'm not defending it or saying it was okay or whatever. And that has nothing to do with the modern day Christians. They don't believe in killing babies just so they get the right religion. You know, that's just, people often criticize Christianity for what it did 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. You know, literally 1,000 years ago. That's not what's happening today. Maybe what's happening in other religions, we won't go there too much, but these people, so, and again on that, yeah, some of these other people, they're doing it for religious, not economic reasons. But the left, but there are economic drivers behind history. Sometimes it just allows things to happen. Say, a certain religious belief springs up in towns. They have the ability to cast cannon better than the rural people that are the knights. And so there's a war breaking out there, and the guys with the cannons win the war because they have the economic industry to build cannons when the knights couldn't build cannons or whatever. And so when they showed up to the knight's castle with a bunch of peasants and a few cannons, they were able to blow holes in the castle doors or walls or whatever and take the castles down. So economics is a big factor, but the conflict between the city and Marx wants to describe the conflict between the city and the countryside in economic terms. I truly believe it's mostly the conflicts, sometimes it's also political terms, different ruling houses and different, even before really nationalism shows up, you do sort of have these different cultural groups that are conflicting with each other. So the culture of the people is often much more important for why things happen than economics. But Marx is right that economics plays a very big role. And a lot of early historians and a lot of pre-historians, I don't know exactly when history first started, or there was before there's sort of historians, and alongside historians there's also antiquarianism. Won't get too deep into it, but antiquarianism to history is sort of what alchemy is to chemistry. There is real chemistry within alchemy, but there's a lot of mysticism within alchemy. And within antiquarianism it's sort of like, oh, this is the room in which Bonnie Prince Charlie slept. Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. And so it gets written down as that way. And an antiquarian believes that the building was built 2 years after Bonnie Prince Charlie died, or was in the town. It just, antiquarianism is sort of collecting stories and information about the past. And sometimes it's correct, because it's taken from, a letter at the time period or whatever. Some of it's correct, but it's without the rigorous historical method. That's why I sort of say, you do have people writing histories in the ancient world, but they're not putting the historical method that's trained, that you're trained if you go through a history major, and how to do rigorous historical research. Because if you look at some of Pliny's writing, they're taking accounts from other things without doing it, of water running uphill and other weird stuff that can't be true, but since somebody reliably said it was true, he believed it because he didn't have the historical method or other sort of, if you will, scientific method of testing some of these stuff. But he's also writing history. I think I'm getting some of this right. So sort of what I'm doing I'm sort of giving you commentary, not good history, because I'm trying to remember this stuff and not giving you good references. So if you really want to know about this stuff, look it up. So you have this idea that you have, as early historians that are trying to do historical method, and the antiquarianisms, they're often viewing history without the context of economics as sort of the economic driving factors behind it. Marx, in his viewpoint, is an economics-based view of things. So the left, who comes out of Marxism, views politics largely through economics. And so they see the economic systems between National Socialism and fascism to be very similar. And I'll tell you right now, I would have a really hard time to explain the differences to you, because I'm not a detailed economics kind of person, and they are very similar. And also part of the problem is explaining the differences, if you will. Goebbels is very red. Himmler is very black in his sort of political leanings, if you will. Goebbels actually sort of comes out of red Berlin, and you get I'm not thinking of the Strassers. I'm thinking Steiner or whatever, sort of the red Nazi guy, the SA revolt fairly early on in Berlin. So a lot of the Nazis there that joined the Nazi party in Berlin, while Hitler's mostly down in Munich, are joining out of, they're former Communist Party type people. They're sort of communists who reject internationalism. They're sort of strong patriot nationalists but they're very red. Maybe not quite communist, as they sort of adopt Nazism. They're maybe kind of rejecting the whole state ownership of all means of production, but they're very red in their viewpoints. So you have that viewpoint of National Socialism, and then you have Himmler, which is, there's big state enterprises. He runs one under the SS. The SS is a state enterprise. They buy Allerich, the company Allerich Porcelain, and run it as a SS-owned for-profit business. Also, the death camps and other things that are run for profit. But so they're buying state-owned and operated businesses. But even Himmler very much doesn't want the economy owned by the government either. Maybe the government gets to own some businesses, but he's, so there's different elements. And so what is exactly National Socialism? Sort of who you're talking to and when you're talking to. And a little bit similarly, because Mussolini is, coming out of a socialist background. His parents were strong socialists. He was a socialist until he changes. He's trying to form a practical, useful, totalitarian economic system. So it changes over time. So what writer, when, and I'm not good at remembering all these details. So I can't quite explain to you what is different about National Socialism and fascism on the economic front. But since the left, whether we're talking, Stalinist left or Trotsky left or syndicalist left or anarchist left or whatever, whatever your, sort of extremism left, or you're talking, what is it? SDP is the Sudetendeutsches Party, but what's the German? SDP, the Social Democratic Party. Also, that's two SDPs. It was sort of confusing me for a second. The SDP, the sort of socialists, they're also coming out of this economics as the primary factor of things, as what makes them different from, say, the nationalist. They may both maybe, in this case, I don't know really what the SDP believe, but they most maybe have people that are both strongly religious, whether Lutheran or Catholic or whatever. That's not necessarily the dividing point between some of these other parties and groups. Is the religion isn't the dividing point, or even some of, depending on, I don't know what the SDP's social policies are, on gay marriage. Do they agree with gay marriage, or did they, none of these people at this time wanted gay marriage really of any party. But you know what I mean. So there may not be major social differences between some of the parties, and so, but the socialists are looking at things through a social or through an economic lens. Okay, this is all setting this stuff up. So this is how the left views this. But National Socialism is trying to change the culture. It is a cultural movement, a fundamental cultural movement. I want to go through this book, and I'm going to get a better handle on some of this stuff I know. And this is what I'm coming to learn. And this is what makes it different than fascism. Mussolini, I don't know how much he believed in either the clericalism of religion or believed in God. I don't know. I'm not a big reader up on Mussolini. But he had no problem with the Catholic Church existing. He even allowed the Catholic Church to run the lower levels of education, which of course may be a mistake, especially if you're starting in 22s, because if you get the kids young, you got them for life. He could have trained those little boys and girls to be fascist and hate everybody else. Because you find very, very, very few anti-Nazis that are coming through the Hitler Youth movement. Okay? You don't have a lot of crypto-communists youth coming out of the Hitler Youth movement. They're indoctrinated. They may be after the war looking around, and I had a reasonably good friend who I knew for a few years, who grew up in the Hitler Youth and who was bombed by the Allies. But he very quickly rejects, once the sort of, being occupied, he rejects a lot. He's passed now, but he rejected a lot of stuff. So he has very clear memories of World War, or had very clear memories of World War II. He was from Hanover, and I got to know him through our shared Scottish connection, because he was occupied by Scottish troops and their bagpipers and their stuff. So he, as a boy, really became wanted to learn about Scottish things. And he moves to America, is where, of course, I meet him. But so he has this very German background, and he was very German. Just because I don't want to dox him, as they say, or out him, so I won't give the name. But well, because it's common. He had a statue up. As he liked to say, he had a statue up to, well, him or his family in every single German town. His last name was Krieger. His last name was Krieger. Very, in many ways, very, very German, and didn't try to be non-German, but he rejected, in sort of the post-war, still as a boy, not National Socialism, Nazism, in the sort of seeing what happens. But in talking to him, and I didn't get into a great deal of details, but I did talk to him because he understood that I had an interest in World War II, as well as our interest in shared Scottish things, historical and cultural too, which we spent more time talking on, much more time on that. But I talked to him about his childhood a bit, and so, oh yeah, he had no, he was, boy, and thought that Hitler Youth and all that stuff was great when he was going through it. He was sold on it when he was going through it. So he was, as a little boy, he was a good little Nazi. And this is, under 10 years old, So he was not a little boy with a rifle shooting, or he was not one of the guys shooting at, obviously in Hanover, he wasn't shooting at the Russians, but he wasn't shooting at the Americans or the British or whatever. He was just a young child, but at the really, sort of going through the junior elements of the Hitler Youth, he was buying it all. He later, I know, I'm sharing a bit about it, gets involved in the Boy Scouting movement, which is, yeah, they have the scouting element sort of in common, but it's sort of a Christian-based movement, and he very much, even in later adult life, continued with the scouting movement and has raised his children through the scouting movement and all this stuff. So he, goes that route, which sort of gets back to this and the Christian element within the scouting movement. The scouting movement very much started as a Christian movement. I don't know if everyone knows that, but it was. That's sort of why the Scouts have always had trouble with, initially with gays, and then secondarily with gay marriage, because at their core and in particular chapters in regions of the U.S., it's still very much within sort of the controlling elements at the state or regional levels or something, within the sort of somewhat devout Christians, not necessarily one church within America, but they're sort of all, a lot of those that stay involved are do it through sort of a church idea. So, and you find that in more rural America than you find that in the urban Americas. So this is why there's always this sort of Boy Scout conflict, and hopefully maybe I'll put this as a long talk rant thing, because obviously it's become that. You find these sort of conflicts of some social stuff they're fine with changes and of the time, but some of the stuff that really goes against Christian elements they have a trouble with, and going on. So that's sort of why they have some of the trouble, is because of their belief system. Now, I'm not saying it's bad or wrong, and yeah, even pretty early on, they weren't against the idea of some boys or girls or whatever, because Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts are two different organizations, founded at different times and have a very different culture. So we're really talking Boy Scouts here, and is what some person said, what actually one college-aged woman says. I'll give them that. Ask a question. Who says girls can't be in the... Oh, no. Where is it written girls can't be in the Boy Scouts? Just give Ben Shapiro his due. It's in the name. Boy Scouts. That's why girls can't be a member. Girls can be a member of the Girl Scouts. And you know what? I personally would be happy if someone creates a group called the Scouts and have it open to boys and girls. I have absolutely no problem with it. But if you're going to have a group called the Boy Scouts, it's for boys. I'm too old, unless I'm a scoutmaster, and I think it's sort of weird if you didn't have your children go through, also being involved, you just have odd adults. That's sort of why sort of the gay scoutmaster was always sort of the fear, because they may be predatory or indoctrinating, or even if they're not predatory, they indoctrinating. That's what they were always more afraid of as scoutmasters than a boy who might be gay or questioning or whatever. Being in it, it was more the scoutmasters teaching what they thought were anti-Christian views, not that they were being unwelcoming to little kids who might have a different identity. Just to get into that. So, but if you're the Boy Scouts, it should be open to boys. If you're the Girl Scouts, it should be open to girls. If you just want to do the Scouts, which would be a different organization, don't try to force the boys to become something different. Let them be the Boy Scouts. Start your own organization. And if you really want to force a merger, so every single Girl Scout unit and every single Boy Scout unit has to disappear into the Scouts, and they're all done, and you'll find the Girl Scouts kicking and screaming louder and harder than you'll ever find the Boy Scouts kicking and screaming about stopping a merger. Trust me. So if you have the Scouts. If you want to have the Scouts and have it gender neutral, I'm happy. But if you have the Boy Scouts, have it boys. Have the Girl Scouts, have it girls. It's in the name. But back to this. So Hitler's and the Hitler Youth Program was an effective indoctrination program. And the vast number of youth, because by that time in the war, most all the girls are now in the girls version of the Hitler Youth, the BDM, but the Nazis keep them very separate, as in do organizations, though they often do events together. They'll do youth events together, whether camping events or winter relief collection events together in a joint thing, but they're two different organizations. And that, again, if you want to do a joint event between Boys and Girl Scouts, happy to have you to go do that. That's fine, and you can go camping together. Cool, but they're two different organizations. And do as much joint as you want to each other, but whatever. Okay, so so some of this I do get from, and I know a bunch of you are German and have parents or grandparents and you've talked to them that were through the Second World War, and so you know this kind of stuff. But Mussolini foolishly, from a fascist point of view, I'm not saying it was a bad decision for because especially starting in 1922 when he comes to power, probably would have been a bad decision for the overall health of Italy, but from a control sense, foolishly he allows the youth education to continue to be in Catholic hands. And this comes back to the core views of Mussolini, where Hitler doesn't come out of the socialist movement. Goebbels and some of the other do sort of come out of elements of the socialist movement and join Nazism. Benito Mussolini and fascism comes out of the socialist movement, rejects major elements of socialism, including one of the primary elements is the state ownership of the means of production. They think the means of production primarily should be in private hands. It just should be state controlled, state managed, state whatever. But they're both statists. I mean, they're all statists, but so they're heavy statists. So Mussolini in fascism at its core is not trying to undermine religion, in their case primarily Catholicism at its core. They're not trying to erase the church. They're not trying to get people not to believe in Catholic teachings. They're not pushing any of that at their core of their viewpoints. They may or may not, I don't know, and this can come down to an individual, have practices and teaching that go contrary to some Catholic beliefs. I don't know, maybe divorce, or that the fascists may believe, oh well, if you want to have divorce, you can have it where the Catholic Church is against it. Again, I'm not saying that they are completely in line with Catholic cultural and social teachings, or something like that, but they don't have that as a fundamental element of fascism there, and you can find fascist movements that have very fundamentalist Catholics. You know, they're fundamentalist Catholics, including within the church, promoting fascism. You know, and obviously, if a lot of those people do, they're actually fundamental fascists. They're not. I mean, fundamental Catholics. You know, they're sort of hardcore Catholics that join fascist movements. So you have that, as well as in Protestant countries too, religious elements that join fascist movements. And so obviously there's all kinds of weird growing elements of National Front elements that are, some are more fascist, some are more nationalist. I have a hard time because I don't read the languages and really know which ones are really fascist, which ones are really nationalist, and then which ones are actual National Socialist / Nazi type groups. I really don't know. I'm afraid of all the groups because I really don't know them. And you can have a group what it is today, and for the next 2 years it's something, but then have another, seeing that the group is successful, have another group sort of infiltrate and take over the top elements of it and shift it to something else. So you can have we don't want to be overrun by people of a massively different culture, so we're nationalists and we're strong and we're getting electoral popular vote. And then some more extremists see, oh, this group's good, let's go take it over from the inside. You can have that happen. I've known of groups that have sort of had that kind of thing happen to them. So I don't know which groups are which and which groups are what in the modern sense. And also I don't trust groups because of World War II and the horrors of World War II. I don't think other than really nutty extremist elements, are going to come out and say that they're really Nazis. They're going to hide that fact from maybe many of its members and from the public at large, who might vote for them, an election just because the other side's god awful, so we'll just try these other nationalists, which may be secret fascists or secret Nazis. So I have this trouble with modern, and I know some of you are. I don't know that any of you are Nazis, but I know some of you are modern sort of nationalists and want sort of stronger controls that way, who watch this channel. And I'm not questioning your beliefs. You know what you believe. I don't know what you believe. You can tell me what you want me to think you believe, and which may be true what you believe, but that's just what you want to tell me. And you might even want to tell me something you don't believe just to sort of shock me, but that's what you say. So what you say may be true, but I'm not saying it isn't. Just saying I don't know. But so Nazism and the church, and the book which I have read, Hitler's Compromises, really talks about, and they talked in sort of big cases in both sort of the Lutheran Protestantism of that parts of Germany and the Catholicism within Germany, the southern areas and other things, resistance to the Nazis, and how a lot of the leadership elements recognize this culture war, if you will, with the Nazis. And so they start fighting it. We've seen earlier the Bonhoeffer, and he's coming out of the Protestant sort of viewpoint within Germany. This is Pope Pius the 11th, or is that the 9th? That's the 11th, I believe. Sorry, I'm Roman numerals. It's coming out. And from the book, cardinals and German cardinals are reporting this stuff back to Rome, so that they know that. Now, some of these cases, both in the Protestant, but and particularly some of the stuff I read about, is in the Catholic areas. Good, solid voting Nazis. That they're voting Nazi in all the elections. And very well maybe party members, and even sort of low-level functionary party members, some of them. A bunch of them are voting Nazi. A bunch of these people are, I'll say, not very well educated. Oh, they can read and write fine, but they haven't read a book on politics in their life. They're farmers, they're factory workers, they're whatever. But they have a strong religious belief, but they're also strong nationalists. And they're sort of buying into the National Socialism element, the economic elements of the Nazi Party, and they're buying into the Germany's getting bigger and better and great, element of it, so that they think they're loyal Nazis, but they're also loyal to their religion. And a lot of, on the ground level, a lot of the people aren't seeing it, but they, a few times that when they come to either arrest and have arrested and that, or, you know, come to arrest or threatening to arrest, tens of thousands, and so like 20, 30,000 people show up at night and stay all night around these churches, literally like 20,000 people, or 20,000 people go surround the police station where, and I'm sort of messing this up a bit because I don't remember details of all this stuff, where a religious, you know, a priest or a bishop or something has been arrested, and all just stay there peacefully, stay there all night, and maybe go to their work the next day, but show up the next night in the same numbers, whether they're rotating through. And the Nazis sort of realized that, and because they have, and this is what, because some of this research has been done because they've been getting access to the Gestapo files on this. So none of this stuff makes the newspaper. Very few people were reporting this sort of after the war. So a lot of historians didn't get a lot of the stuff, and a lot of this stuff is being sort of modern day found out about it because people are, historians who obviously read German, are going and actually reading the SS reports, because the SS had a lot of plainclothes people that would go into these audiences and just listen to what people are saying to each other, as well as sort of chat with, you know, nothing on them says SS. You know, they're not wearing the black trench coat. They're not wearing a black uniform with an armband. They're just going in as dressed as German civilians. And they're doing this to all kinds of groups in Germany. So there's all kinds of reports of these files. And so it's very interesting. And many of the files have been destroyed. But a bunch of them has survived. And these guys are going through and looking at what. This is sort of why it's sort of spotty on some of this stuff, because some areas and regions of the files have all survived. Because some of the files were destroyed in bombings, other files were, you know, purposely, you know, bonfires. The SS were just burning everything. So some of this stuff is, we know about some of this better and in very good detail because we have the original SS reports about what was going on. And so the SS were finding out and reporting to the Gauleiters, to the, you know, the various levels of the SS, and all the way up to Hitler. But a lot of these people were good Nazi voters. These weren't the refuseniks. These weren't the problem Germans. These weren't the Germans that we're fighting culture. These are the people that are voting for us, that are out there keeping, surrounding the jail so you can't take the guy out to some other jail because because it leaks. Some of the local policemen are devout Catholics or whatever, leaked out what was going on, and so everyone's surrounded. So you can't get these guys out. You can't get this guy out or whatever. And there's all this protest. And even the Nazis send in some SA guys, again plain clothes, to start like break windows on some of this stuff, to start to create a riot, and the crowd immediately shuts them down. No violence, because the Nazis, at least in some of the cases, wanted to have a violent situation so that they could then send in the police to stop the violence, and send in the SA to stop the violence. No, so if somebody started to like do something bad, nope, they immediately shut them down. And even when a few windows had been broken, the next day the protesters are out there fixing the windows. They're literally, and this is some of the report, some of the government buildings, they're fixing the problem because they don't want any violence, but they're saying, no, hell no, you're not doing this to this person because he's a leading figure. So this really shows that had the German people resisted some of these Nazi practices, resisted picking up the Jews, it would have stopped. It would have stopped. But the German people didn't do that. The German people let the Jews go. If you were married to an Aryan woman, if you were Jewish and you were married to an Aryan woman, you weren't picked up. It was okay. You could live with the American woman. They put a lot of pressure on the women to get them divorces. Probably about 3/4 of the women who are married to Jews divorced their husbands. I'm just guessing that right now, but I know it's a large percentage. But if you stayed married to your Jewish husband, he wasn't picked up. Until sometime, I think it was late 44, in the Berlin area, they round up all the Jewish husbands. The women, the wives, immediately go stand in front of like the government buildings or the police buildings with signs saying, "Free my husband" or whatever. Again, this is not reported in any of the newspapers. They only get this from sort of post reports, and they sort of, and for, I don't know, 4 days, 7 days or whatever, all these Jewish women, are all these Aryan women, of like a couple hundred. I mean, there's only a few hundred people, less than 1,000. I forget the exact numbers. Less than 1,000 that men were picked up. And then this is late 44. This is, death camps are going on. They're burning people as fast as they can, gassing them. They're standing out there. Within the week or so, all the husbands are let go. Oh, sorry, we made a mistake. They were just supposed to be picked up and interviewed and check their papers, and they were supposed to be returned. So if you were an Aryan woman married to a Jewish man, your husband could have obviously died in a bombing or whatever, but did not go to a camp, any sort of camp other than this one area camp briefly for a while in the Berlin region, and then sent home to go home, because at least a good portion of the wives got out and protested and kept the protest going up 24 hours a day in the middle of Berlin, and wasn't reported by the newspaper, but it was like, I'm in a major sort of area where lots of Berliners were driving by every day seeing these protests. They didn't bring the Nazis out to club the women down, the Gestapo or the SA or whatever else. They didn't arrest the wives. All it took was to keep your husband out of a death camp was to protest. Had the German people protested the rounding up of the Jews, let me say this again, had the German people protested the rounding up of the Jews, it would have stopped and there would not have been a Holocaust. Because I have this evidence. It's in a book. And you can look at the book, Hitler's Compromises. You look at the book, it cites the sources. You could have stopped the Holocaust. You didn't need an anti-Nazi revolution. You could have all been loyal Nazis, Germany. But you just didn't want the Jews rounded up. You wanted, no longer to be in charge of the banks, or no longer be in charge of the movie industry, or whatever the hell you thought it was terrible that the Jews were being. But you could have stopped the Holocaust simply by protesting, by refusing, and Hitler would have compromised. Because Hitler's whole program was to push in one area to see if he gets resistance. If he doesn't get resistance there, it then spreads all over Germany. If they get resistance, Hitler comes out to look like the good guy and go, "Oh, sorry, this local guy, he overstepped his bounds. He misunderstood the communique, the directory. Oh, okay." And so Hitler would, send orders or whatever, and once or twice maybe showed up in person, but mostly send orders. And so everybody thought that, well, if the Fuhrer only known, this is what they get from some of these reports. If the Fuhrer only knew about these problems, he would solve it, whatever the problems were, which could be ration distributions or whatever, because they get some of these reports, are late in the war. They're not about Christians or Jews. They're just about, because the Gestapo were running around listening to people in the bread line, in the ration lines. And it was just, well, if the Fuhrer knew, he would solve this kind of thing. And this was a common throughout Germany. And this was a myth that Hitler, which I think continues to this day, sort of subconsciously or consciously within certain elements, even Nazi elements. But if the Fuhrer only knew, he would have solved this. And this was a sort of myth going on within Germany. I say myth because the Fuhrer often knew, and often he directed some of these programs that people got upset with. And part of some of these things was evacuating children from cities to camps in the countryside, and the problems that it caused. And the people saying, well, if the Fuhrer only knew. No, he ordered it. He didn't tell anybody he ordered it because he knew it was going to be unpopular. But it was the thought that if the Fuhrer only knew, he would fix. Not all the time, because some of the times he truly didn't know, because sometimes some of the Gauleiters were sort of hardcore fanatics and would try something. But if it sort of tried and it found out to be worked, it would sort of get pushed up the pipeline to the Fuhrer, and really, you mean we could do that, get away with that? Well, let's try it in another Gau. Okay, it works there, and try another Gau. Okay, now we'll put this policy nationwide. And if it's only the sort of, the communist and the socialist and the other radicals complaining against it, no problem. See, that's the sort of thing, is these SS guys were out there listening to try to find out if it's just rabble-rousers from the left that were protesting, they would have just arrested them or something. But once they figured out that it was actually a lot of people that voted Nazi in whatever elections, that were Nazi party members, you know, had a party badge, that were protesting this, then they completely backed off of whatever it was. They just backed off, claimed that somebody made the wrong decision, didn't make the right report, whatever it was. Because sometimes the Gauleiter would sort of show up and go, oh man, you know, this other guy over here, this Reichsleiter, no, it's higher than a Gauleiter, whatever, you know, made the wrong decision, and I was out of town and didn't know it, and whatever, you know, lies often, but sometimes it was real, because sometimes people overstep their bounds, and they would come in and fix it. So, Nazism is not mostly about economics. It is about a cultural phenomenon that has religious backgrounds, and the sort of thinking leadership within the church, or various churches, recognizes this. And so they start the fight, and they continue the fight, and then the war breaks out, and then Hitler's back. Hey, Christians! Good to see you. We love you, Christians. Yeah, pray for the war that we're fighting the communists. And so again, Hitler and the Nazis sort of make a unspoken pact with the various Christian groups that now they're fighting the atheists in the East, the communists. So there's a lot of Christian, again, sort of détente with the Christian church within Germany, fighting the communists. And it's clearly understood and written about in diaries and things within the elites that this is just a temporary thing to get support, both on the home front and from the, you know, religious soldiers, that they're doing the right thing in their great crusade against Bolshevism. So, but at the core of Nazism is to destroy Christianity. So with burning concern. So I'm gonna label this episode a long chat episode. I presume those of you who don't like this have already bailed out by this time long ago, but it'll be labeled. Okay. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. Please post comments, corrections, because I did do a lot of this from memory, some from many years ago, some from just a year or so ago. So I'm sure I'm getting details wrong. And if you know that, fine. Now we've got 2% dissent because of this. And this, I made this event partially about Pope Pius's comments, but also about other stuff going on when I made it. It's sort of the Catholic religious, and now I know more, and I would do more of these if I was building them in. And actually, and someday I do plan on doing that, is to have not necessarily always big 2% hits, but different hit levels for different events, and allow you to go, you know, oh, there's, you know, some Catholic, you know, some policy that's been affected, it's giving us a hit here. Do you want to continue it, or do you want to back off? And you have some sort of choices on some of these things. Arrest the guy or not, or whatever. But that's for someday in the future. Thanks so much. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.